Shock Piece: The Search for Freedom. A novel by C. Nguyen. Chapter 35. The Refugee Camp. 1978. "Hey, there's a boat coming," Luke said. They were standing on the hill overlooking the beach. Trin put both her hands over her eyes to shield them from the sun's glare and asked, "Where? Where is it? I can't see anything." "Look over there. There. See? Look on the right." "Can't you see it now?" "Oh yeah, I see it now. It's only tiny. It's coming closer." Luke jumped up and down with his discovery. Then he ran toward the beach. "Hey, everyone, there's a boat coming ashore." It spread rapidly, and the rest of the camp was shouting with the news. It was mid-afternoon. The sun was strong and high still. Its glare was bright, reflecting light on the white sandy beach. The waves were splashing in gentle, languid movements, quiet and good-natured. The sea bubbles spread onto the wet sand and disappeared below its surface, going back to the ocean to restart another cycle. Yesterday the surf was rough, with gusts of wind, violent and fierce, echoing the howling of the sea that churned hearts. That kind of weather made the adults look out to sea and worry. "Let's hope the boats out there survive," Trin heard her mother whispering at night, pleading to the wind and begging it to protect desperate boat people. "Let them come safely to shore. Please let them have a chance. Please." It was like that every time, and every time a boat or trawler came ashore, the whole refugee camp came alive. Noise broke out everywhere. Footsteps were heard from every direction. Children and adults, young and old. They were all rushing to the beach and standing there in eagerness, waiting for a glimpse of hope. Running in bare feet, bare chests, or in just an open shirt, boxer shorts and thongs, the men and boys led the race. The rest, young girls and women in tattered clothing and battered footwear, were not far behind. Most of them were still skinny, as muscles needed time to grow slowly with the food in camp, but overall they looked healthy and alive, a real contrast to the shocking images they portrayed to the whole world when being rescued. Racing to the beach to welcome the new arrivals, the appearance of the crowd might look depressing, but deep down in the hearts of those people were pure happiness and hope. They hoped to see and to recognize a familiar face among the new arrivals, that of a friend, a cousin, a sister, a brother, a lover, a wife, a husband, a mother, a father, or even anyone from their hometown. They were all longing for a loving touch in this foreign land. Anyone, anything, the delicate, dear connection that linked them to the homeland they had left behind. As slim as it might appear, that chance of reconnection helped bring warmth to their hearts and provide stability at the time when everything was slipping away from them like quicksand. The refugees were clinging tightly to that sheer hope every day, a flimsy thread linking them to the life they once knew that now seemed so out of reach. The Vietnamese are not travelers by nature. Living at the same town where they were born or at the same address for generation after generation is the norm, and they rarely leave their place of birth unless something forces them to. Added to that, their desperation of not knowing when their homecoming might be was heartrending and indescribable, as at that time it seemed like an impossible situation. They were crossing the border illegally and branded criminals with severe punishment if caught. It was an irreversible outcome. They risked losing their families, their homes, their properties, and everything, including their lives, to escape. There was only a thin line between happiness and despair or safety and death, either of which could be the boat people's destination. They could easily stumble on either side by luck or ill fate and bask in glory or wallow in despair. The refugee camps for the Vietnamese boat people in the peak periods of 1978 to 1989 were places packed with stories of tragedies and heartaches. According to UNHCR, there were roughly 750,000 boat people who landed on shore alive. It was also estimated that there were 450,000 to 500,000 people who died at sea. The death toll was 40% of the total number. The figures were daunting in hindsight, and it seemed impossible to believe. Of a total of approximately 1.5 million Vietnamese refugees who arrived safely in the Promised Land, about half of that number were refugees in the Orderly Departure Program, initiated by UNHCR in the late 1979, and half were boat people. Of those 750,000 to 800,000 boat people who finally settled in their third country, many had suffered great loss, catastrophe, and overwhelming injury to their body and spirit. That staggering number shows the desperation of Vietnamese refugees who chose to flee their homeland by crossing the sea in primitive small boats, which was clearly extreme. Danger of death was irrelevant to them. They simply desired to get out of the hellish environment they were trapped in. They had been pushed to the limit. This expatriation was entirely out of character, and many had never experienced it before in their lifetime. It was a phenomenon. Their compulsion to take to the sea in droves created an unusually strong impact on the outside world. Then, after the ordeal of surviving the sea, this transitional life in a second country so foreign and so far away from home was very unsettling to most of them. Their homesickness was so overwhelming that some even thought of returning and facing criminal charges. Their conflicting emotions were full of turmoil that they could not understand. It seemed there were more and more boats coming in since June 1978, just a few weeks after Trin and her family arrived at Pulau Besar. It is a beautiful island in the coastal region of Malaysia, approximately 13 kilometers from the mainland. The nearest town is Terengganu. The stretch of land was virginal and picturesque, with strikingly clear blue water and a fine sandy beach which had the shape of a pregnant woman lying on her back. There were fountains, little hills, rivers, and ponds on the island that added to its beautiful and tranquil landscape. The island had turned into a refugee camp, with the influx of hundreds of people coming in every day in the period from 1978 to 1979. The exquisite, scenic island had become the refugee for approximately 8,000 boat people at one time. When that maximum quota was reached and the island was overflowing with thousands and thousands of refugees coming in daily, the camp was forced to close. The refugees were transferred to a larger adjacent island called Pulau Bidong. At its peak, this latter camp housed 42,000 boat people, making it one of the largest refugee camps during 1980 to 1989. Without the Vietnamese boat people, the beautiful white beach would be just as peaceful and serene as a holiday resort. However, looming over the sandy beach were the carcasses of refugee boats in various sizes, colors, and shapes. Mostly were painted in blue and green, and they looked odd and very out of place. Some even had their names still proudly etched on the bow. Bleached by the sun, the paintwork was fading slowly, but the letters and numbers were still visible. The MT-259 must be from My Tho, and CT-3671 was from Cần Thơ, and so on. They were obviously just litter for disapproving lovers of nature. However, they were saviors to the Vietnamese. These fishing boats or trawlers, which had normally been used for trips around the coastal regions only, were scarcely equipped to sustain a rough sea voyage for longer than a week, or for storms longer than an hour. That was the sad explanation why many boats had sunk to the bottom of the Pacific in small storms with winds as mild as 60 km per hour or less. The lucky ones arriving ashore had had extensive damage to their hull, where water had seeped in through the cracks and would surely have sunk if not rescued in time. Many parts of their structure, mostly the planks, were being used as construction material in camps and were slowly being taken away, leaving the pitiful carcass naked on the sunny beach. The unusable remains were left there, unclaimed by the boat people, and stayed as reminders of their fearful experience. Those who escaped safely with their whole family, parents and children, husband and wife, were privileged. They were grateful and blessed. Even though they longed to re-encounter a familiar face, anything at all to bring them a moment of reminiscence of the old life they had had was enough. However, the feeling was intensified for those who traveled alone. The loneliness and insecurity of these people was excruciating. They were hoping to see someone who would bring them snippets of news from home, of loved ones left behind that they might not be able to ever see again. Even though fleeing from their birthplace was the obvious move, they had left with broken hearts and broken pride. Until they had been accepted for final settlement in their third country, they were stateless citizens with nothing. The true meaning of "I was nothing but a refugee," as Pearl S. Buck noted. Kim sympathized with some of the girls traveling alone in the camp. Many boys and girls, 18 years old or even younger, left their family to take their chances on the rough seas by themselves, as their parents could not afford to accompany their children. The cost of getting out of the country was substantial, and many had to scrape their last pennies together to finance just one or two members of the family. Parents hoped to give their children a chance of beginning again, even if it meant danger and death. Kim understood and felt the unbearable longing for a reunion with loved ones from those less fortunate young people. Their faith was sustained by searching for faces whenever boats arrived. They needed the reassurance to gain strength and confidence in order to stay alive and go on. "Are you coming, Kim?" Trin asked her sister, ready to run off to the beach. "Of course, but wait a minute. Let me find my thongs." Kim reluctantly abandoned the book she was reading and hurriedly put on an old pair of thongs. The book, Tu Look Van Duan, was a precious copy that Kim borrowed from the camp library, one of many prohibited books that the communists had confiscated or burnt during the feverish days after April 30th, 1975. Some thoughtful boat people had brought it along with them and left it here at the camp. The refugees were lucky to have the chance to read it again after 3 years of longing for something old and romantic in sophisticated literature. The language was a total contrast to the crude language of the communists in their relentless themes of fighting. The language was a total contrast to the crude language of the communists in their relentless themes of fighting, killing the Americans, and liberating the citizens of the South in all of their books, poems, and essays. Vengeance seemed to be the core of their literature, transcribed into ugly words with which they had tried to poison the South in schools and everywhere else. Albeit the new government's intention of eradicating the entire cultural heritage of the South, many books, songs, and poems of pre-1975 were kept hidden and exchanged secretly between the Southerners back home. Kim and Trin and all of the refugees were delighted to reread those old titles and enchanted to re-listen to the old songs. Kim put the book down in the corner and together they ran to the beach. Trin wore her special knee-length flowery dress, which everyone said was more appropriate for her nickname, Roly-Poly. She had turned into a chubby girl of 16, growing quickly out of her tiny shell in just a short period of breathing in the fresh air of beaches, the sea, and freedom, but still not very tall. The lack of nutrition from her early childhood had shunned her growth a fair bit. See, you do not eat mother's tentacle vegetable and you stay short because of that. Juan often admonished her jokingly. Kim had on her dark pants and plain colored top. She felt the eagerness of welcoming the new arrivals as much as the rest of the camp. Perhaps someone she knew would be coming. Perhaps someone from her high school would join her here to ease the pain of her homesickness. Even though the 18-year-old girl was devastated to leave her high school friends behind, she still understood the grave implication of what real devastation meant to other less fortunate people. She felt lucky every time a boat came in, considering the voyage they had just taken. Her family was safe and intact. She was protected and secure in her environment. She was on land. The sisters arrived at the beach when the crowd was already dense. People were milling together, and talk broke out animatedly among them. Good gosh, did you see that? Holy shit, a pitiful sight. Yeah, the girls on stretchers. They're barely 18, 19. Poor things. Were they dead? I'm sure they wish they were. Poor girls. They were as lifeless as corpses. Body and spirit, they were beyond help. The girls and the women on board were gang raped repeatedly for days. Fucking bastards. The Thai pirates, I swear. How could they be so cruel? They're bloody animals, of course, that's why. Why didn't the men try to do something? There were men on board, weren't there? Ha! The boat went off course for days, and they had no more food and water. They were all weak with exhaustion. The men could not even stand up. The fathers of the girls were beaten senseless when they tried to interfere. Besides, I've heard that the boat was raided 3 times, and the last time, the fucking animals could not find anything more valuable than exhausted human beings. So they decided to feed the girls and women, give the men and children water, and towed the small boat alongside their vessel for their barbaric pleasure, someone said angrily. The bloody bastards only released the boat after 2 weeks of enjoying the gang rape. Is it real? That's incredible. It's shocking. It can't be real. Yeah, it's real. A sad truth of sickening human behavior, but it's real. The man shook his head in disgust. You meant the boat was robbed 3 times, and the last time the pirates decided to rape the girls and women instead? Yeah, robbed 3 times by 3 different groups of pirates. On 3 different days, they were intercepted one by one, and some even thought that they were being rescued by the second and then the third encounter, only to realize that it was the pirates again and again. How horrible that must have been for them. I feel sick. They only released the girls after seeing that they were dying and of no use to them anymore. Unbelievable. I can't fathom that cruelty at all. How was it possible? The pirates, how do they know of refugee boats? I think the pirates are sending signals between themselves when they sight refugee boats, or they might have heard of the loot gained from the other pirates and are now better equipped for the treasure hunt. It's so easy for them. We are, the boat people, I mean. We're the easy target, hungry, thirsty, lost, gullible, and exhausted. They only need to push and shove, not even a knife or a gun to threaten us. Yeah, our boat was attacked twice. We were very fortunate, if you call that fortunate, being robbed only twice. At that time, they were merely fishermen who smelled the gold from refugee boats and got greedy. They only came on board with knives and hatchets, which they used for scaling or chopping fish. We were already out to sea a week and so confused at the vastness of the sea. At first glance, we were glad that we had come across some human contact in the ocean and we were ready for them to come and get us. We waved to them and were quite happy. Only when they stepped on board with their weapons, primitive as they were, did we realize it was too late. They only took our valuables but did not harm the girls or women. Mac was among the crowd and he shared the family experience with the throng. What month was it? Around May 1978. Did you fight at all? No, it took us by surprise. We were shocked that there were pirates out there. We were so naive. We thought that once we were at sea, we would be rescued and no harm would come to us at all. Of course, that seemed to be the same for most of us. No one thought that there were worse dangers than communism. Obviously, the phobia of communism outweighed the risks. The destructive force of the sea is meaningless to boat people. We just wanted to get out, regardless of the consequences. It's madness, Mac concluded. But they weren't violent, were they? The Thai pirates you mentioned, I mean. Someone turned the conversation back to the Thai pirates. No, they weren't violent then. They were harmless fishermen, just greedy but not cruel. Not harmless as harmless truly means. They were barbaric and avaricious the way they mugged us, but you know what I mean. I wish they were only interested in valuables and they would leave the girls and women alone. They weren't caught or punished at all, and so they continued to do whatever they wanted, man. It's getting worse because they've gained so much from their hunting trips, and the greed has now turned to lust as well. Thai fishermen were so poor. One successful scoop was worth more than a decade of fishing. The temptation was too much to resist. I wish the authorities could do something to prevent it. It's too vast for policing, the whole Pacific Ocean. Besides, which authority and which country will carry it out, this police work? The UNHCR is trying to do something about it, I think. Yeah, the atrocity of the crimes is too evil to be ignored. The UNHCR are investigating the problem, interviewing the victims to try and pinpoint the areas and the culprits. But it's vast, the sea I mean. It's impossible to search and patrol the whole Pacific Ocean. Besides, the cost for that kind of operation is huge. They only have limited funding. The refugees are already a burden, what with feeding, housing, and settlement. But the crimes are beyond the scope of human suffering. It's true, I know. There are bound to be more offenses if there are refugee boats floating around the sea. We can only hope that the refugees know how to avoid those monsters and arm themselves to ward off the attacks. Their sisters were stunned with the conversation they overheard. There were more and more boats coming in with horrifying stories of pirating and raping. They had been waiting to greet the newcomers in dread and suspense lately because almost 99 out of 100 boats coming ashore had been raided. Half of that people had seen rape and violation or killings and kidnappings. The price the boat people had to pay for their freedom was very dear. Nonetheless, Kim was amazed at the influx of boats. "Where are the girls now, uncle?" Kim asked one of the adults. She used the term uncle as the customary way to address an older male with respect. "They are in the sick bay tent waiting to be transferred to Terengganu. They are in real bad shape, kids." "Do you know them?" another adult queried Kim. "I don't know. I might go to the sick bay and check, uncle." "Be quick if you want to. The ambulance is coming soon to take the girls to hospital." "Okay, thanks, uncle." The girls ran off immediately. Kim was curious as well as feeling dejected at the girls' predicament. They were as young as she was, Kim reminded herself. The sick bay tent was crowded with onlookers. It was a small square thatched hut, partially enclosed on two sides by timber and palm leaves. It was 10 by 10 meters, with a room at the back for discreet examination and an open plan in front. The dirt floor was raised a fraction higher, and there were benches along two sides and a high bench for the examination of minor ailments and injuries. There were people waiting patiently on the bench as usual. The sisters had to force their way forward to get closer. Being bolder and smaller, Drin managed to propel herself to the front and got quite close to the figures on the stretchers, which were placed on the examination table. Covered by thin-colored blankets, the two small, still bodies with their eyes closed were a sad picture. Their battered faces were swollen and bluish. Some of the blood was still fresh. It was oozing from the wounds and forming a trickle down the throat of one of the victims and formed a puddle on the ground between her legs. She opened her eyes wearily, just in time for both Drin and herself to recognize each other. In that moment of astonishment and recognition, both were horrified at their circumstances. They were speechless with embarrassment at their situation. "Oh no! Oh no!" Drin cried out involuntarily after an instant of silence. She stepped forward. One of the healthcare volunteers in the tent held her back. "Don't disturb them, kid. They've had enough, don't you see?" "But I know one of them. I know her." Drin pointed toward Mai. "Please let me see her," Drin pleaded with him. "Really, is that so?" He thought for a brief moment, then continued. In that case, you can come closer and try to comfort her, kid. She's a loner, escaped all by herself, he added sorrowfully, as an afterthought. Tell her to hold on, okay? Thank you, I will. Drin replied perfunctorily and hurried to the stretchers. The girl did not understand the implication of the volunteer in telling the victim to hold on to her life. Hey, is that you, Mai? She asked the girl hesitantly, wishing that it were not. Is that you, Drin? Mai whispered her question. Her voice was weak and slurred. Her breathing was laborious. Drin had to lean forward to hear. Yes, it's me, it's Drin. You. Drin did not know what else to say. She abandoned her sentence. Kim is here too. I'll go and get Kim, wait here, she quickly added. Drin turned around, looked for Kim in the crowd behind her. She did not realize the stupidity of her statement when asking Mai to wait for them, as if the victim would have had enough strength to stand up and walk away, as if all the pain and agony would have disappeared and she would have become normal again. She waved urgently for Kim to come closer, mouthing the words, "Come quickly." Kim tried to push her way to the front. Drin must have seen something, she thought. What's up? She asked with a little frown. It's Mai, she's in there, Drin murmured. Which Mai? Kim asked, and then a horrible realization came instantly. No way! Mai Nguyen from Yalong High School, my friend? Yes, your friend Kim. Go and look for yourself. She looks really bad. So bad. Drin shook her head in bewilderment. Her voice was shaky with emotion. Are you sure? Kim was reluctant to believe her. She stepped tentatively closer to the stretchers. She was afraid to accept her fact. Her heart sank with Drin's revelation. Back home, Kim remembered Mai as a beautiful girl with the slender proportions of a model. Her hair was silky and straight, cascading down her back like a flowing river. Her eyes were full of life, and her voice was vibrant with energy and ringing with optimism whenever the girls met. Her parents were once wealthy and educated. Before 1975, both were lawyers who were now unemployed as the legislative system was obsolete in the communist Vietnam at that time. The new regime closed down law school immediately and put in jails magistrates, judges, and lawyers with terms according to their duration of service for the previous government. Being the only girl in the family and being as beautiful as she was, Mai was her parents' treasure. She was elegant and sophisticated in her manner and in every way. Kim thought of her as the pure, innocent image of an 18-year-old girl brought up in an affluent lifestyle. Now, looking down at the girl on the stretcher, Kim was shocked and disturbed. Oh no! Oh my! Why? Why must it be you? Kim could not resist exclaiming. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Kim reached for her friend's hands and held them tightly. She felt inadequate and hopeless. She was incapable of doing anything to relieve her friend's anguish. Mai's hands shook uncontrollably in Kim's grasp. The girls locked eyes for a moment. Kim felt the pain, the shame, the humiliation from the look on Mai's eyes and wept harder. After a while, Mai started. I was so scared. I'd never been so afraid in my life when it happened. There were a dozen of them standing around on board. Most were young men in their early 20s. Some wore unbuttoned open shirts, showing dark skin shiny with sweat. One of them had tattoos all over his arms and back. I kept seeing his tattoos. They kept returning to my head even though I tried not to. There was something like a figure of a naked, voluptuous girl on one arm and a snake on the other, and a large skull was on his back and a pair of crossed swords. On his chest were some writings. His hair was long, shoulder length, and straight, untied and messy. He looked directly at me, eyeing my body up and down. I tried to divert my eyes immediately, and I wanted to be smaller, much smaller, to be out of focus, to disappear out of that scenario. And that was all I could remember. Everything else was so wrong after that. I don't want to think anymore. Mai could not say another word than just that before sobs broke out of her chest like a dam breaking. She gasped for air between her moans. Drin joined her sister and her friend. The three girls cried together openly with tears streaming from their eyes. Drin used the back of her hand to wipe them away constantly without success. They were unstoppable, much as the grief and sorrow which continued to come their way. The descriptions from Mai fitted in with the tattoos on the same Thai boy they had encountered at sea. It seemed he had succumbed to the devil inside him and went along with greed and evil deeds after all.